Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Magic, a brand new Instagram live series that I am hosting, which is all about fantasy books and fantasy authors for my fellow fantasy readers and writers. This first episode will be a solo episode all about me and my books, just to kind of introduce you guys to the series. The replay will be posted on my Instagram and on my YouTube, and then eventually I hope to have a podcast, and so interviews will be repurposed as podcast episodes. And I do apologize, I just had some dental work done, so if I speak with a bit of a lisp, I am so sorry. I am just learning how to speak yet again. And yeah, I will just give it a couple seconds for some people to join, and then I will jump right into it. So I will be reading directly from the questions that I will eventually interview other authors with. Again, this episode is just a solo one, so I'll be interviewing myself. But yeah, these will be the same kind of questions that I will ask fellow fantasy authors in the future. If you are a fantasy author and would like to be interviewed, definitely send me a DM. If you know of a fantasy author that would like to be interviewed, let me know, let them know that this is a thing. Yeah, I hope to do, I'm gonna do an emphasis on indie authors, self-published authors over traditional authors, but I am not opposed to hosting a traditional author as well. So let's get started. Today's Behind the Magic episode is going to be about the Fidalian Chronicles. This is book 1, Summer's Revenge, and then I also currently have book 2, Winter's Wrath. The Fidalian Chronicles will be a trilogy, so there is a third book forthcoming that'll be released in 2026, and then I also do hope to write more books in this world, so it will be a main trilogy and then extra books within the Chronicles. So the first question: give us a short synopsis of the book/genre, and what fantasy subgenres does it fall into? So Summer's Revenge is it takes place in a fictional realm that's divided by the seasons. So you have the Kingdom of Summer, the Kingdom of Winter, the Kingdom of Spring, the Kingdom of Autumn, and then you have the Edgewood, which is a semi-sentient forest that divides and surrounds the kingdoms. And that's the gist of the basic world building. It follows the Crown Prince of Summer and his quest for revenge for his parents, who were killed when he was young. So early on in the book, his uncle, who is the current King of Summer, declares war on Winter, and he joins up thinking that it will be an easy way to get his revenge. Meanwhile, his twin sister, Skyenzi, is pretty certain that it will lead to the doom of the entire realm. But anyway, they go off, and it's definitely a lot more than they expected. So the book has lots of royalty, emphasis on sibling relationships and friendships over romance, the chosen one, prophecies from the gods, tons of magic, warring kingdoms, some royal intrigue, political intrigue kind of thing, and yeah, it's got a little bit of everything. And as for fantasy subgenres, Summer's Revenge, I describe it as a YA first and foremost, but it is a epic fantasy. It can also be medieval fantasy, sword and sorcery fantasy is another subgenre, royalty, magic, all that kind of stuff. It's not wizards, and it's not high fantasy, and it's not urban fantasy because it's not set in our world. Question number 2. How long have you been writing? How long have you been writing? I have been writing... Technically, I started writing when I was 6, but I don't particularly count those first few attempts at books because I was just so young. I didn't even really know what I was doing, but that's when I really first started thinking about writing. And I didn't really realize until I was about 13 that I wanted to actually write novels and maybe do it for a living. So I actually started Summer's Revenge, the first draft, when I was 13. So I have been writing math, about 12-ish years, seriously. So yeah, and I've been published for 5. Tell us about the fantasy world and the magic system. How does it work and what inspired it? So again, the fantasy world is completely fictional. It's called Fidalia, and it is named after their god, their main god, Fidal. And again, it's separated by the seasons. So you have all the kingdoms are different seasons, and so it's always summer in summer, and the snow never melts in winter. And for a little bit of backstory, autumn and spring, the land is still there, but the kingdoms have been destroyed in a previous war by the gods after the kind of monarchs of those kingdoms kind of went against Fidal. And so they exist, but they don't really exist anymore. So ever since that tragedy happened, summer does kind of have 2 months of spring, and winter does have 2 months of autumn. So the snow does melt in certain sections just for those 2 months where the god kind of gave autumn a little chunk, but the actual kingdom of autumn doesn't exist anymore. And other than that, that's kind of the basics of the fantasy world. There are fantastical creatures. The summer has trolls. Autumn has these little baby dragons that are about that big. Again, autumn and spring don't really exist anymore, so you don't get to see those kingdoms or those creatures in these main books. Though I do plan to write some like prequels, so you might see that in later things. But spring has pixies, and then winter has these ice wolves. And then the Edgewood has ghosts, ogres, goblins. Goblins are a big one. And then various other kind of creatures that are like straddling the line between alive and dead. And the Edgewood is kind of this like, not forbidden place, but you can't cross the Edgewood unless it kind of deems you worthy and your cause worthy. And I'll get into that more during the religion question, but yeah. And then as for the magic system, I don't really know what inspired it. I really wanted character with fire powers, and I'm not going to, like, these chats are going to be mostly spoiler free as much as we can make them, so I'm not going to get into which characters have what abilities. But I really wanted a character with fire powers, and that's kind of where it all started, and it kind of branched out from there. But the way that the world works is there's 4 different types of magic users. So the first one is just an immortal, and basically their magical power is a long-lived life and eternal youth. And so they can be killed, but they're not going to just die of old age, or they're even very resistant to diseases. And then from immortals, you then have the next level up, which is a gifted immortal. So they've got the long life and eternal youth, but they also have one gift, which is a magical power. And these gifts are typically elemental in nature. So gifted immortals will have fire powers, wind powers, earth powers, that sort of thing. And then some more like kind of obscure ones. Like there's one character who can create illusions. And in winter they can create frost and snow and ice. They're all different like subsets of, I guess, the water element. And then you also, on the other side, you have mortals, and they're just like the regular people that walk around that have no magic. And from them, you then get the magic wielders. And they're kind of like, I equate them to wizards, but they're not really wizards. But they get like the more kind of physical and mental abilities. And so magic wielders have a regular lifespan, but they have extra powers. And so they also share the same abilities. So like, let's say there's like 10 abilities, all of them have access to the same 10 abilities. Not every magic wielder will unlock all of them. There's different levels to it. You have to actually train at it, and people could live their whole life not knowing that they are a magic wielder if they never unlock the powers. And so their typical powers are healing, telepathy, telekinesis, portal creation, talking to animals, emotion manipulation. And then there's a few rarer abilities like being able to sense and take the magic of others. and being able to see the past, present, or future. So yeah, and that's kind of the basics. And then there's a fifth type, and the fifth type kind of combines both sides, and they are called immortal magic wielders. And so they have a long life, eternal youth, access to all of the magic wielder powers, but also their own special gift that is unique to them. They are the most powerful. They are also the most rare. There's only one currently in existence in this world that people know of. And yeah, that's kind of the gist of that. I hope it wasn't too long-winded and that you guys could keep track of what I was saying. Next question. Does your world have a religion or special holidays? So this one, I have my notes up on my computer over here just because I don't use the special occasions as much as I probably should in the book itself. But then again, the kingdoms are like mostly at war during the case of the series, so they don't really have time for special occasions. But summer celebrates the summer solstice and winter the winter solstice, obviously. And little fun fact, they're actually on the same date because it's always summer and summer, and it's always winter and winter, so they're actually not on opposite sides of the year. Kind of like a little fun thing that I did. Spring has a flower festival, and autumn has a festival of trees. And birthdays are typically small family occasions. Noble and royal weddings are public affairs. People come of age at 18. In summer, you are given a key to symbolize unlocking your future. In winter, gifts vary depending on the family. Spring throws a wild party in the person's honor, and autumn encourages a day alone in nature to reflect. So they kind of have these like cool special, thank you, AG. I'm just like rambling here. Thank you for that. Yeah, I really wanted to create a, for those who are listening on the podcast, AG said the magic system sounds so interesting. And yeah, I really wanted to create something that wasn't just the simple black and white magic systems that I have read before. But yeah, as far as special occasions, like all the kingdoms celebrate like the height of their seasons and certain things like that. And then summer also has this thing called the Festival of Honor, which they put on when the up and coming monarch is choosing their future spouse. So if you are the heir to the kingdom, they will host a festival of honor to bring all of the eligible bachelors basically to the kingdom, and then they kind of compete to become the next either queen or prince consort if you have a daughter. And yeah, that's basically the special holidays. As for the religion, this is tied into the seasons themselves. So the main god is Fidal. He is the one that created the realm and gave life to it. All the people of Fidalia believe in him and worship him if they choose to be religious. The religious people do look down upon the non-religious, but not violently. Fidal is also the god of justice, life, wisdom, storms, the sky, wealth, and change. So he's the main one. Then you have Madge, who is the actual embodiment of magic. Her existence is debated upon by a lot of people who don't really believe, and she is rarely worshipped except when thanking her for the gift of the minor goddesses. Some also consider her the goddess of magic and fate. So those that have magic tend to worship Madge, whereas the rest of the population doesn't really care. It is believed that Fidal did something for Madge, and in return she gifted him with 4 beautiful daughters, the 4 lesser goddesses, Willa, Audria, Sancia, and Stella, who were born of magic, Madge, and Fidal life. And it's a thing in the world where you always have to keep magic and life in balance in order to survive. It's kind of a theme that goes throughout the series too, which took a while to get right. So when the goddesses came of age, Fidal gifted them each with a territory of Fidalia to govern, and they are responsible for the land and the people within it. So Willa became the goddess of winter. She is also known as the goddess of death, travelers, sleep, the moon, and rivers. Audria became the goddess of autumn. She is also known by the people as the goddess of fire, forests, war, darkness, and love. Santhea is the patron goddess of summer. She is also known by the people as the goddess of the sea, animals, vegetation, the sun, and hunting. And then Stella is the youngest. She became the goddess of spring. She is also known by the people as the goddess of children, fertility, art, healing, and light. So they each have their different domains, and so most people believe in all four goddesses, like if they're going to believe at all. But typically Willa is only worshipped by people of winter, and they would only, other kingdoms would only like pray to Willa if, say, they were going on a long journey. Since she is the goddess of travelers, they might ask Willa for guidance and safety along their trip. But the kingdoms of summer and winter have been at war for as long as anybody can really remember, feuding back and forth, it's an open war and then silent war, and then, it's been a mess for a long time. And so for a Santhian from summer to pray to Willa is kind of like a no-go. They don't do that anymore, whereas they used to in the past. And yeah, that's the basics of the religion. It does play a fairly large part in the lore of the world and the character's journey, but it's not a book about religion, if that makes sense. Alright, next question. How do your main character and your villain relate to the magical aspects of your world? So the main character in this is the Crown Prince of Summer, and when the story starts, summer magic is banned in the Kingdom of Summer. It is illegal to practice it, punishable by death. And so the main character, and it has been that way since the main character's parents died, and that's kind of what prompted this ban, as it is believed that they were killed by the use of magic. And so the main character hasn't really seen a lot of magic, and so he kind of has a neutral opinion on it. He doesn't really believe in his uncle's full ban of it. He doesn't think that magic itself is dangerous. It's about the person who wields it. So if he had the choice, he would probably bring magic back, but he's never really experienced it in any real capacity. Whereas in the Kingdom of Winter, with our villain, the villain is King Frost of the Kingdom of Winter, and he is a gifted immortal with the ability to create and manipulate frost. Pardon me. So he uses magic, obviously, and in winter, magic is used with abandon. People with magic are elevated higher above those without. Magic is power, power is strength, and any kind of weakness is looked down upon, right? And so, pardon me, the main character and the villain have very differing opinions of magic and different experiences with it. But as the series goes on, we see a bunch more magic. There's less magic, again, in book 1 because of this ban in summer. So, but it does become a bigger part of the series as it goes on. I am so sorry. Next question. What's your favorite fun fact about the world/magic system? So the first one that comes to mind is the Edgewood itself, and the Edgewood is actually like the afterlife. So there's 2 places that you can go when you die in Fidalia, and if you have lived a good life, you will go up to the stars to live with Fidal and his daughters. And if you don't live a good life, you will be reborn as a tree, kind of doomed, fated to live the rest of eternity watching over the world that you kind of wronged. And so the Edgewood is actually basically like a mass graveyard of people that didn't make it to the stars, and that is why it's semi-sentient. The trees can kind of move of their own accord, and it's kind of a creepy, dark place. But yeah, that's kind of not really a fun fact, but a fact. So yeah, the Edgewood is basically a forest of lost souls. And do I actually have an actual fun fact? The magic system is tied to names. So for gifted immortals, the power that you possess is evident in the name that you have, and your parents can't really like choose it. Like they don't sit down, like Frost's parents didn't sit down and say, we're going to name our son Frost so that he has frost powers. It's just kind of like that name is what popped into their head, and it's like kind of bestowed upon them from the gods. And yeah, so if you're ever wondering if somebody has gifted mortal abilities in this book, take a look at their name and try to figure out if it's possible. Yeah, kind of a little hint there. Next question. What is your favorite fantasy world / magic system outside of your own books? So I thought it would be fun in this series to ask authors about the books that they also enjoy and have read. Because, it's not just all about us. We get our inspiration from so many different places. And so I have two. My favorite magic system, I think, I've read so many fantasy books, so it is hard to choose. But one of the most unique ones I found was Mistborn, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. I've only read this first book, so take that with what you will. But I honestly was so intrigued by this magic system of like ingesting metals and then using them for different purposes. It's been a while since I read it, but I do believe that there's like 8 different abilities, and they're like 2 sides of a coin. So if you can do one, like you can do the other half of that one, but you might not be able to do the others. So some people can do more than others, and I just thought it was so cool that like the kind of metal that you ingest gives you different abilities, and if you don't have the metal to eat, you can't like use your magic. I just thought it was really cool. Really well done, too. Like, yeah. If you haven't read Mistborn, you should. And I need to read the rest of the series. I just haven't got around to it yet because they're just so big. And I need to, like, reread the first one at this point because I've forgotten so much. And, like, you won't be able to see this in the podcast, but the copy I have, like, the print is so freaking tiny. I don't know if I can do it, but we're going to try it. It's on the TBR this year, so bug me about it. And then my favorite fantasy world is the fantasy world of the Iron Fae series by Julie Kagawa. This right here is the Iron Sword, and this is like book, 7 in the series, so don't start with this one. This was just the easiest one to pull off my shelf. But this is like an urban fantasy type thing, and it's about the fairy world. And so, like, this partly set in our world and then partly set in what is called the Never Never. It has many names. The fairy realm has many names, but the Never Never is the main one. And this series actually inspired the idea for the seasonal kingdoms, because you have the summer court of the fairies and you have the winter court. I don't believe that there's autumn and spring in this one, like in ACOTAR, but I could be wrong. They're definitely not prominent in the series itself. But yeah, just the world of fairy is so intricate and so unique. Like, she's written like 10 books in the series, and in each one she introduces new elements of the world, and they all fit together so well. And I'm just always in awe of how she does it, and I don't want to go to fairy because it is incredibly dangerous there and everything will eat you. But it's also just so cool at the same time. So if you haven't read the Iron Fae series and you are a lover of fantasy, you definitely need to read it. It's a completed series. There's 4 main books, a companion trilogy, and then a second companion trilogy. And I haven't finished the last book yet, but up until there, it is incredible. And I'm sure that the final book will be too, so you definitely need to check it out. But back to me. Second last question for the Behind the Magic series. Do you listen to music? Sorry, I cannot speak with this dentist stuff. Do you listen to music when you write? And if so, what? So it varies. For this series, I used to listen to this playlist that I stumbled across on YouTube when I was first writing it. It's called the Motivational Drive. And it just has like a bunch of like fantasy music in it. there's some music from How to Train Your Dragon. There's stuff from, Two Steps from Hell, which I think might be a video game. I don't even know, but the music's on there. Stuff from Thomas Bergeron. Like, it's a long playlist, and I've basically listened to it on repeat when drafting this series back in the day. And I do come back to that every once in a while if I need like an extra little push. I just need to get back into the zone. I will put on that playlist. But my main go-to these days is the 1 hour Skyrim Rainy Nights playlist on YouTube. And I just listen to that on a loop every time I write. And I've kind of, like, I think his name is Pavlov, like the scientist, whatever. I've Pavlov myself with this playlist so that anytime I put on the Skyrim Rainy Nights playlist, I've listened to it so often when I write that as soon as it comes on, my brain like goes into writing mode. And it's to the point where I actually like came across like a reel when I was scrolling aimlessly that had some of that music in it, and like my brain was like immediately like, should I be writing? Like, it was like the weirdest thing, but I was actually like, oh my god, I've trained myself to write when I hear this. This is insane. But it really does work. It gets me in the zone. And it's just literally like Skyrim ambient music with the sounds of rain and thunder in the background. So yeah, I typically listen to that. Every now and again, I will like look up like another random like epic fantasy playlist if I need something slightly different. But yeah, those are my go-tos. I don't listen to music with words as a rule. I typically don't. Depends on the story again, but with the fantasy, I definitely do not listen with words. And then the last question, what is next for you, and do you have other books? So if you don't know, Summer's Revenge is my fantasy series, but I do have a YA dystopian series as well. You can actually see it in the background there. Can I? Right there. That's the first book there on the shelf. I have a YA dystopian series, the Guild Trilogy. It is 3 books plus a short story collection, and it is complete and ready to read now if dystopian is more your speed. It does have also a heavier romantic subplot than Summer's Revenge does, so if that's more your style, definitely check it out. As for what's next, I will be focusing on the 3rd book in the Fidalian Chronicles, which is currently nicknamed Project Ruin. Project Ruin is in its 3rd draft. I am at roughly 125,000 words, and as I'm making this video, my deadline is 4 days from now, and I still have like 20k to write, so we'll see how that goes. But I definitely will get Project Ruin done in the next like week or so, for sure. Then I'm going to set it aside for a bit, let it marinate, come back to it after a month or so and with fresh eyes, and basically tear a whole bunch of it apart yet again. Because it took me so long to do this round of revision, that I just lost so many threads in the process. I know I've repeated myself. I know I've forgotten about subplots. I know that I've forgotten to put things in and then wrote as if I had done the thing, even though I haven't done the thing. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to get the book ready for publication, but it is my main focus this year, and I have a rough date set for 2026. I will not announce that date until we are much closer, just in case I have to go back on that, but it is coming, and I have a few other Fidalian Chronicle related surprises coming this year, so stay tuned for those as well. And yeah, that is all I have on that. So if you're just joining me now, that was the Behind the Magic, my new Instagram live chat series where I will be interviewing fellow fantasy authors about their books and their love for fantasy. This first episode is a solo episode just for me, just to get you guys used to what we're doing, and I thought it'd be fun to reintroduce my books in this manner. I'm going to open the floor to questions now, so if you have any questions for me about my books, drop them in the comments. I will give a few minutes to do that. And let me see if there's anything I want to add in the meantime. Yeah, so these editions that I have with me, these are the hardcovers. They share the same cover as the ebook and the paperback, with the exception of the dust jacket. Under the dust jacket, rather. It's kind of a little fancy stylized symbol, but yeah, they come in ebook, they come in paperback. They're available to purchase pretty much anywhere that you can find books. They should be on library apps. You may have to request that your library get a copy, but they should be able to do that easily. And then you can also request them at your local bookstore if you just ask, but they are available on Amazon. Is probably the easiest way to get them. I do know that people tend to try to stay away from Amazon, which I understand, so they are available elsewhere. You just have to sometimes dig a little bit. But if you go to the link in my bio, go to my website, and click on the shop tab, it lists like literally everywhere that you can buy the books. So you can click on the format and the vendor that you want to buy from, and they will be there. And yeah, I think that's all I have for you guys. I'm gonna see how long this interview. Okay, so half an hour isn't bad. That's kind of what I want the interviews to be. So if there are no questions, I will wrap this episode up. Thank you so much for those who joined me. If you're watching the replay on Instagram, YouTube, or my eventual podcast, first of all, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, definitely leave them in the comment section of whatever app you're using to watch this. And if you are a fantasy author or know of a fantasy author that would like to be interviewed, definitely send me a DM here on Instagram and I can add you to my list. I don't have the first, interviewee set up yet, but I do have a few people in mind, so stay tuned for the announcement of when the next chat will be, because it will be an interview one. There will be 2 of us here. You can ask questions and learn about a brand new book series. So yeah, thank you again so much, and stay tuned for the next one.